Hi, this is Zoe Routh, and I'm actually recording this phone call while I am in Gathaga, which is in the Kosciuszko National Park, and I am on my 1-month ski work-life experiment where I'm doing some working and doing some skiing. So this is an unusual place for me to record the podcast. And my guest is actually in Las Vegas. His name is Richard Nongard. And Richard is an expert in contextual psychology, problem solving, emotional and social intelligence, and appreciative inquiry. He's got a doctorate in transformational leadership, cultural transformation from, hopefully I pronounced this correctly, Bach Graduate University.
Bucky Graduate University.
Bucky, okay, cool. And is licensed as a marriage and family therapist in both Texas and Oklahoma. Yeehaw! And he's the author of at least 2 books, and the 2 of the latest ones are Transformational Leadership, How to Lead from Your Strengths and Maximize Your Impact. And his latest book, which we'll talk about today, is Viral Leadership, Seize the Power of Now to Create Lasting Transformation in Business. So welcome, Richard.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. And it's kind of interesting, of course, technology. You're skiing and I'm melting in 117-degree heat.
That's Fahrenheit. So I guess the Celsius translation would be...
About 42.
Oh, really? 42.
Yeah, it's hot. Maybe 45.
Oh, and you've got a suit jacket on. Hopefully you're in aircon.
I'm in the air conditioning.
Fantastic. Well, you've had quite the background experience. Tell us a little bit about your journey. So how did you get to where you are now, where you're a keynote speaker, you're publishing books, and you've done all this counseling work and psychology work. So tell me how this all fits together.
Well, it all came about by accident. I never planned my life. And early on, I was an entrepreneur. I sold Olympic greeting cards door to door. And in high school, I started a lawn business and caddying. And when I went to college, I had to figure out a way to pay for it. So I paid for it by actually doing magic shows. I made balloon animals and did magic tricks at children's birthday parties on the weekend and ended up paying for college that way. But I've always been an entrepreneur, and so I did become a therapist, but I really view my counseling degree as a degree in problem solving. So although I've worked as a psychotherapist and actually continue to maintain a small private practice, I've really applied my expertise in the business world from a problem-solving perspective. And I love being an entrepreneur. I've owned actually 4 restaurants along the way. And so I've done a lot of interesting things, but they've all come together in, I think, some pretty awesome ways. And the most recent result is, of course, my book, Viral Leadership.
Yeah, well, that is quite an extraordinary journey. So let's talk a little bit about this concept of viral leadership. So, the idea of going viral is out there on the internet, and where you post funny little memes and it goes across the world in random ways you couldn't have expected. So tell me how you've applied this to the leadership concept.
The idea of transformational leadership, and transformational leadership is a specific style of leadership. As we know, leadership is an academic study, just like sociology or psychology or medicine or really any other branch of academia. And in leadership, we talk about different leadership styles. And the goal of transformational leadership, or one of the goals, is to create a cadre of leaders so that the change that you create is a sustaining and lasting change. Well, of course, the metaphor is, things going viral. And in business, whether it's a small business or a Fortune 500 company, we can either with intention or organically create awareness, create enthusiasm, create momentum. The challenge for businesses is not to create this. It happens to businesses. But when it happens, to be able to capture the moment and to create something sustaining and lasting. So probably the best example from the internet might actually be Justin Bieber. As I understand the story, is mom put up some videos of him singing at some school events, and his videos caught on and he got millions of hits. Well, there are lots of other people who put video of them singing, and some of them are excellent singers, but they got 32 hits or 50 hits or 100 hits. What was it that caused those videos to take off? But more importantly, how did Justin Bieber, and although he's had a lot of bumps along the way, create a career that wasn't just a flash in the pan, but actually has been a sustaining force in pop culture? So the metaphor of viral experiences on the internet and leadership going viral to create a sustaining and lasting business, I think is a concept that we all should explore in business.
So do you have a good example of a leader who has been able to manage this kind of transformation through what you're calling viral leadership?
Well, lots of different examples of this. One of the examples actually is a story I shared in my book. And Mayor Bloomberg in New York, the mayor of New York City, during a time of crisis, he had a sign language interpreter who was, I can't do sign language, but she was interpreting for a very important press conference. But she was so good at it and so effective in her communication that not only did the deaf community benefited, but everybody paid attention to her. Well, she had her 15 minutes of fame, but what she did with that 15 minutes of fame was she decided to leave her secure, cushy government job and to create a sustaining business from it that served a broader community through training and education, high quality interpreters throughout the New York area. And her influence has certainly been pervasive across the entire deaf community over the last 5 or 6 years.
So what was it about her? Was she mesmerizing or dynamic, or what was the quality that was part of her essence that allowed her to spread her message?
It's really about passion for the work, genuineness and authenticity. So I think viral leadership, for leadership to create something sustaining, has to be predicated on two things. It has to be predicated on authenticity, and it has to be predicated on intention. And her intention was not to get famous or upstage the mayor. Her intention was to passionately communicate to the people that she cared about. And because of that genuineness, she then had the ability to create a business that has helped exponentially the number of people that she could have reached had she maintained her secure job with the city.
Yeah, right. Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
And I like the aspect that you talk about. There's two aspects you talk about in that. One is what is your intention, and being clear with that, and being doing intention hygiene. It's for the greater purpose. And the other aspect is sort of getting over yourself and letting go of your fears to go boundless, because it's very easy to stay stuck and bound in a safe job. But to take those risks is pretty crucial. Is that one of the key components for you in terms of?
Yeah, leaders always encourage teams to push further and take risks. Unfortunately, we often do this through goal setting rather than intention setting. And the problem with setting goals is that goals are based on the future. And the great master Oogway said something important for all of us. He said, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery. All we have is the present, and that's why it's a gift. The great master Oogway, in case you kind of recognize the name, but you're not sure who he is, that's the turtle from Kung Fu Panda. But the idea of goal setting is to be in the future, but the only thing we actually have control over is right now. So goal setting actually is a habit that, although the research shows, can help us to actualize a specific target. The problem with goal setting is that our natural tendency is to actually revise our goal downward as we run out of time as we approach those goals, and so that we can feel good when the time comes. And it actually can be a trap of mediocrity. Intentions are different. Intentions are right now. And intentions aren't something somebody else can give us. Intentions, I am the only one who can say I am. So I am trustworthy, or I am confident, or I am caring, or I am excited, or whatever intention it is that I want to step out into in the business world. When we set intentions rather than set goals, we'll look back at the previous month when we would have set goals and recognize that we've actually achieved far more than we ever thought. And I love helping companies through keynotes or other trainings that I do begin intention setting, because it can set in motion an incredible process for leadership.
So do you advocate getting rid of goals, or is there a place for them?
There's definitely a place for goals. Again, the research shows that when a team sets a goal, it increases the likelihood that they'll reach the goal. But in goal setting, we can't just use that acronym that's popular in business training, SMART. SMART goals, measurable, attainable, specific, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need to look at the issues surrounding the goals. I mean, even ethical issues can come into play. And numerous companies over the years have had their employees set goals at the expense of the consumer experience. And some high-profile companies like Wells Fargo here in the U.S., which is a large bank, and a couple decades ago, or Sears ended up with the same type of problems in their automotive department as a result of them reaching the goal, but at the expense of customer satisfaction and, in some cases, even fairness.
That we've had that experience here in Australia too, through our Royal Banking Commission, where the banks had specific targets or goals, if you like, and they corrupted their intentions or let go of their values and ethics and principles, and implement a whole bunch of corrupt practices in order to achieve those goals. So I love that you incorporate intention, because I think I'm translating this correctly. The intention is about a spirit and ethic of a way.
Absolutely. It is through intentions based on genuineness and integrity that we, as a company, can share our core values. And when we share positive core values, we create enthusiasm, not just among the teams and employees that we've created, but even among the customers and the consumers. Think about businesses that actually have laid out their intention with clarity. Company like Apple. And the results are, of course, they're the first $1 trillion company and nobody else is. Everybody knows what Apple stands for. Everybody knows it's about design. It's about innovation. It's about certain characteristics and qualities. In fact, I actually don't think the Apple products, which I have owned or currently own, are actually any better than any of the other products.
That's sacrilege.
It's the spirit that they're selling, and you get on people ask in an internet group, well, should I use an Apple or should I use a PC? And it's going to be a spirited debate because those Apple users are rabid about their love. Yeah.
I'm a diehard Apple user myself, but you're right. Like, I've seen my friends have like a Galaxy phone, and its camera is way the hell better than the Apple camera. And
right.
I have this little thing happen in my brain where I'm like, wait, that doesn't line up with what I believe in Apple. But there you go. So it's not always, they don't.
And it's not only Apple, it's even the small businesses. You walk into a small business. Let's take a restaurant, for example, where somebody maybe has immigrated to the country and they want to share their cuisine that they love with a bigger community. They're excited about introducing those ideas. Their menu is spectacular. Their service is wonderful, even though they didn't learn the same style of service that we might learn in the restaurant industry here. But it's a magnificent place, and we can contrast that with the restaurant whose sole goal, the entrepreneur's goal, is to simply not have a job anymore and work for themselves. Mm-hmm. And the service isn't as good and the food isn't as excellent because the intention is self-serving rather than the intention of building community. I talk a lot about environmental leadership, community culture and engagement, being able to build a community to align with the culture that we're advertising or that we're trying to reach, and then creating a bigger footprint so that people can know about us.
I like this whole idea of community and leadership, and I think it's pretty critical for engagement and motivation, as well as building a following. One of the things you mentioned is how to engage remote workers, and it's a big challenge for a lot of the clients that I have as well. Is not everybody's coming to work and sitting in a big building. So I'm guessing that this intention piece, this building community piece, is part of that. But tell me about your philosophy about how to engage remote workers.
So in 1994, I left my job at a psychiatric facility where I was working as a therapist, and I started an education company providing continuing education to other mental health professionals. I still run that company. That's actually my core business. And over the years, I've had, of course, office staff who work with me. But as technology has changed the way that we deliver education services, I have a fairly large tech staff. So I have an electrical engineer whose desk is actually about 10 feet away from my desk, and he is probably the employee that I interact with the most, that I work with the most on a day-to-day basis. There's no wall between us, and we're often exchanging information and ideas. But we supervise a team. We have team members in Australia. We have team members in Turkey. We have team members in Vancouver, Canada. We have a team member in Florida. And these are remote employees. And one of the things that I've recognized is that I have an expectation that the remote employees will do a good job, but they're part of the vision, but they're not really part of the team. Sometimes they might even be working a completely different schedule. We're working during the daytime, they're working during the nighttime. And I've had to come up with some creative ways to work with my remote workers so that they feel like they're not just an employee who's getting a check from somebody they're contracting with, so that they're part of the team. And so my favorite story is I noticed that my Turkish programmer, my code writer, was actually drinking hot tea on a regular basis. Whenever I would speak to him, he would always have his hot tea. I'm in Las Vegas, so I always have my big iced tea. But he had his giant hot tea. And so I asked him what kind of tea he was drinking, and he told me about Turkish tea, and he showed me the pot that he used. He actually held it up, on Skype and showed me the pot. And it was fascinating. I had never seen that before. So without him knowing, I actually bought all the stuff. I Googled Turkish tea. I bought the double teapot thing. I bought the Turkish tea. I had it all sent to me. And after I had collected all the things that I needed to make my own Turkish tea, I gave him a call, and he said, well, what is it? What do we need to be working on? I said, no, it's tea time. Make sure you run the clock right now, because they keep a counter. I said, and Sean, who's my engineer, I said, Sean and I are going to have tea with you. So this is when you're usually making your tea. And I showed it. He was so excited. And we had the three of us had tea together over the internet. He ended up having some personal problems shortly thereafter, and he came to us. He was very comfortable being a part of the team and sharing the vision. And I'm grateful for the experiences that I've had with him. But anything we can do to share genuineness and reality with our remote workers is really essential.
Well, they're human beings, and I think
right.
Whether that connection is virtual through something like, this webcast type thing, or whether it's the person next to you, just that sort of engagement, like, I care about you, I'm interested in you, we've got something in common, that builds the rapport. It comes back to intention. How are you going to show up as a leader? Are you all transactional, or are you transformational? And transformational is about hearts and minds and implementing from there. I love that story. That's beautiful.
Well, and one of the other things that I've done in regards to that is somebody told me probably about 30 years ago, was a salesperson who I knew, and he told me that the most useful thing he could share with me was the idea that we should learn hello, please, and thank you in as many languages as possible. And so nice. I'm probably up to about 30 now. and so when I have, I just had a new remote worker from Ukraine who, I gave him a couple projects this week to see how he would do, and I made sure that I greeted him in Russian and said thank you in Russian. I speak a little more than a few words in Russian, so I could actually surprise him by my knowledge. But again, I wanted him to know that I was willing to communicate with him in any way that was necessary for us to complete the project together, but that I also wanted to be more than simply somebody who was supervising him, and be somebody who was open to building a relationship, because that's how you get long-term outsourcing. Yeah,
that's fantastic. I love it. So you talk about 4 ways of getting buy-in from every stakeholder, 4 ways to get buy-in. And, starting with intention and being excited by that, what are your 4 ways to get buy-in?
Well, we probably only wrote 4 in the book because we were limited on how many pages we could actually put out. There's a zillion different ways to get buy-in, but one of the things that I've been teaching a lot in the trainings that I do recently is co-creating a story or a narrative. And this is where appreciative inquiry as a process for transformation becomes so valuable. Appreciative inquiry is a process of strategically creating buy-in. It's been researched by Case Western University as well as many other universities. It's been used by a lot of companies, big companies like British Airways and John Deere. But the great thing about appreciative inquiry is that it doesn't look at what's wrong. Instead, it has a company look at what's right and decide to do more of what's correct rather than stop doing what's wrong. And there's a huge psychological difference in how this impacts outcomes. And by creating a narrative through stories that are shared in the process, that narrative becomes something that's a part of every one of our team players. Likewise, in sharing vision, we can co-create the vision. I was actually hired once to speak, and they told me they were unveiling the new vision for the company, and they told me what it was and asked me to prepare a keynote based around some of these themes. What I didn't know was that this was the first time their employees would be exposed to this new vision, and it caught people off guard. Since then, I won't ever do a keynote again where I share the vision first. I want to be doing training in the weeks that precede that with their employees so that they can share, so that they can co-create the vision before it's unveiled as a unity event rather than something that management is giving them. I think that's a real important way to create buy-in.
Yeah, we're going to pick up our offices and move halfway around.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Other things, transparency, metaphor, simply extending a helping hand, asking people, what is it that you need? Using effective communication, so many different ways to create buy-in. And unfortunately, a predominant method is actually strong-arming cooperation. If you don't want to be on the bus, get off the bus. I've heard that metaphor more than once.
Yeah. So what do you think about that as a metaphor and a practice?
It's not my favorite metaphor, and I do have a degree in counseling, so metaphors are my thing. And I had a boss many years ago who came in. He was a young MBA. He had taken the CEO position. We had a clinical director who was an MD before that. The CEO was an MD, so she came from a clinical background, and he came in and basically said, you're either on or off the bus. And that was in 1994. I got off the bus. That's when I started my business, and I haven't had a paycheck from anybody else since 1994, but I passed out a lot of paychecks to other people, and that business, as far as I know, hasn't really grown, hasn't really experienced a whole tremendous amount of success.
Yeah, right. So get on or off the bus. Do you believe then that all employees should stay with a company? So is it a process of engaging those that engage ongoing, or is there ever a time where there's a mismatch?
Well, certainly there are times there are mismatch. I've terminated employees, and I've terminated them for a number of different reasons, ranging from obvious reasons like you stole from us, like actual real money, and a lot of it, so you can't come back any longer, and here's the keys, and we've reported you to the police. That did happen to me one time. So there's lots of reasons to get rid of an employee, to terminate the relationship. I've had people who just weren't able to complete the task. That's where I'm very grateful for my experiences as a therapist, because I have hopefully had empathy for those folks and shown them the door in a way that was not only best for us as a company, but also gave them some of the tools to grow into the opportunities that might come their way. I did actually once terminate somebody by giving them a referral to somebody who might use their services at the level that they were able to provide. Employees make the decision to leave, to pursue different opportunities. sometimes companies are fearful, oh, they're in competition with us. But the reality is there's 7.5 billion people on the planet Earth. There's enough business for all of us. And so we should embrace those people who are going on to better their own lives. And in the end, we may be able to effectively network with their success in ways that benefit both of us.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot more holistic a view than get on the bus or get off the bus.
Right. I think we should just all get off the bus and have a picnic at the bus stop and maybe walk to where we need to go rather than pollute the environment with the bus anyway.
Okay, I think we've whipped that metaphor to death.
Right.
So you talk a lot about, as a therapist, I'm sure this is woven into your practice of leadership, how to make leadership subconscious. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So rituals are really important. And we engage in rituals at a subconscious level throughout our daily experiences. We are primarily creatures of habit. For example, I woke up this morning without the alarm needing to go off at the right time because I get up at the same time and I go to bed at the same time. Largely, I even eat the same things for breakfast. I tend to watch the same TV shows. I tend to do the same tasks at the same time at my desk or with phone calls or the other tasks of the day in a predictable pattern. Those are all hallmarks or elements of our subconscious processes. We don't have to think how to breathe. We don't have to think it's time for breakfast. We don't have to think how do we drive a car to work. Those are all unconscious and subconscious learnings. We have a ton of learnings that we need to relearn, unconscious learnings that are self-defeating or self-limiting, and limiting beliefs are contagious among staffs. So by creating new rituals surrounding the idea of intention or optimism. So I use the shower every morning as a great opportunity to step into intention. I step in the shower, I turn on the water. Well, I turn on the water first. But I stay in for an extra 1 minute, and I think to myself, what intention do I want to set for the day for myself? What is it I want to share with other people? And then as I step out of the shower, in all of my actions through the rest of the day, I try to remind myself of that intention that I set. And if a person does this for 21 days, it's going to be a habit. You'll end up doing it the rest of your life. And you'll be stepping into positive intention. And you'll be replacing, so many people try to stop the unhealthy things they do. Stop trying to stop that stuff. Just start doing the things that are good for you. And pretty soon, you'll be doing those more often than you do the self-defeating things.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. What a great little practice. And so it's really about intention and being mindful of rituals and how you set yourself up to create the results that you want. I was just writing a post about this in another community that I belong to, and they're like, how do you get over the imposter syndrome? I was like, well, don't worry about the being part. Do the doing part first.
Absolutely.
About rituals and practice for sure. Richard, my last question for you is around loyalty. Now, I wrote a book called Loyalty, so I'm curious that you mention this in your book and get your take on how to build loyalty with a team or with employees or with clients. Tell me about that.
Loyalty is probably the single most important trait in hiring a person. And the reason why is it's a lot more difficult to teach a person loyalty than it is to teach them a skill. I can teach people just about any task they need to do, but I often either don't have the time or they don't have the ability to learn loyalty. It really is an internal characteristic. And so I think it's real important to spend time determining in the interview process. I think the interview process should actually not be my opportunity to let somebody sell me on them, but instead for me simply to share the vision and to assess whether or not that's a vision that they can step into. And if it is a vision that they can step into, then loyalty is going to come with it. But loyalty is, again, one of those internal characteristics that I think is probably above all else, certainly in making hiring decisions. But we also loyalty is a two-way street, and we can create loyalty by being good to the people who we work with. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that during the difficult times, our employees are also having difficult times. This is the time for me to step up to the plate with generosity. This is the time for me to share the resources that I have with the people who are on my team. This is what builds loyalty, recognizing our employees. One of our greatest internal needs is to be recognized for our security and significance, the things that we do. And we foster and create loyalty by recognizing people. Just a few months ago, we had a big meeting, and I had engraved plaques made for everybody. And those plaques all had some sort of recognition for something they had done in the previous year. I think I passed out 33 of them. And when I walk into their offices, by the way, all of those offices aren't necessarily in my office. And around the country, I've seen this hanging on the wall. I was just in somebody's house the other day, and there was the plaque I'd given them a few months ago hanging in the kitchen. So these things have meaning to people.
Absolutely. And they don't have to be a big, huge, fancy gift. One of the ways, for example, when I was working at Outward Bound, I got a recognition award. It was called the Staff Appreciation Award. I think it was called that. But the plaque was like a piece of wood with a rock and some climbing rope around it with a little sign, staff award. And it was about dedication, commitment to the staff. And I still have that thing, that piece of rock and rope sitting in my office back at home, because it's like, oh, wow, someone acknowledged that I've been putting in an effort, setting the intention to be of service, and it felt really good. I totally believe in that. In fact, I read some research by O.C. Tanner not too long ago that when they did a survey about what produces great work, all these different variables, is it training, is it more money, is it even Dan Pink's having sense of purpose, etc. The thing that came out on top, 37% of respondents, which is far and above everybody else, said, recognize me.
Being recognition, right? Yeah. Exactly. That's so important. And the bigger the company, perhaps even more important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
people feel like they can get lost. Every now and then you hear the story of the employee who showed up for work every day, but never actually didn't show up for work every day, but still got the paycheck because no one even noticed they were gone.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
Richard, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insight and your experience with this. It's been just a pleasure having you on the call.
I've really enjoyed meeting you and talking to your audience, so thank you.